Hey guys, Keith Hernandez. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we have a long video, a in-depth, thorough walkthrough of my workflow process when it comes to digital sculpting a cowl. We'll be going through sculpting this guy. He's fresh off the printer. He's got a fresh coat of primer to help show up on the camera, but I'm going to talk to you about how I get to this stage. I'm going to go through some of the thought processes that I have while I'm doing my sculpture. I'm going to talk about retopologizing a raw sculpture and even some print preparations to get it ready for 3D printing and for making a 3D matrix mold, which will be in the next video. This is a multi-part video. It's going to show you how to sculpt, how to create a mold, how to prepare the print for molding, and then we'll end it off in casting. So a lot of things to cover, and I hope that you find something good and helpful for you in your future projects, and if not, something a little entertaining to watch. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the process. All right, to get started, we are in Zbrush. This is the program I use for everything. Now, there are other programs that are out there that you can use, but for my experience, where I have taught myself what to use, this is Zbrush. You don't have to necessarily have your setup the way mine is. If you do see on the screen, it is a slightly customized UI. I will do my best to point out what feature I'm using and where to find it, but for the most part, I use the same thing throughout the whole sculpture. I don't use a lot of the features that are on the top of my menu that I've completely customized, and I basically use the same brushes. So don't feel like you have to be exactly formatted the way I am. So with that in mind, I start with a good base for the sculpture, and the base is basically your foundation, a good head to sculpt off of. This is what I use. I got this from 3D Scan Store. It's a website that I believe is still around, and they have a slew of 3D assets. All are physical scans of people. And this guy I found many years ago, and I liked him because he seemed like a pretty good average facial structure, features. He did not have any hair. Some of their scans have full sets of hair, and you don't want to work with those because you got to then predict where the hair would actually be matted down if they were wearing a mask of some sort. So this guy was bald, and that was perfect. He was a little bit more muscular, and so what I did is I bought a different 3D scan of a more average body, and then I blended the two together. So this is what I sculpt on, and I've modified it over the years. He actually didn't have such a angry expression. I added that because I felt like it helped me get into my sculptures. But you need a good one. If you don't have one, check their store out. 3D scan yourself. If you have an iPhone, Polymaker, I believe is the app, is a good, pretty basic structural scanning software, so it can get your scanning of your features and your face pretty close. And you can work off of that, especially if you're designing something for yourself. This is a pretty average head sculpt. He actually comes out at a little bit larger than 24-inch. So when I do my sculptures, they become 24-inch cowls. I have a 23-inch head that I will use when I have like a client commission that wants something smaller. But when I'm sculpting for myself, which I do 90% of the time, I sculpt off of this because I like, when I wear my own masks, I like them to be a little bit bigger. I'm a 23-inch, but I like to add a little upholstery foam in there to get it, kind of custom that fit and not feel so constricted. I also have on here a 25-inch millimeter calibration cube that I've put into my sculpt. This cube here allows me to basically continuously check on the scale to make sure that the scale is correct. If you don't want to get off scale, because then everything that comes after your sculpture can be completely out of whack. ZBrush is really good at retaining all of your scaling settings, but there's always the off chance that something does happen. I also use a old plugin. I don't know if you can even get it anymore, but I will put it on the screen here. This is Calipers Master, and there's the website right there. This guy made this many years ago, back in 2016, so 10 years old. He doesn't do it anymore. He doesn't make it, but it's what I use to calibrate my sculpture. So if I come over here to this cube, and we'll just isolate it so you can see it, I can hit this bounding calipers, and it tells me that it's within the 25 millimeter range. So I do everything in millimeters, because if you do send prints out, millimeters is pretty much the standard measurement that companies use when they are printing things for you. And it's a lot more precise in terms of getting your scalings to match everything versus inches. So that is where I do my calibrations. But ZBrush has their own. If you go to their plugin, which is over here at Z plugin, I have it docked over here, but it's Scale Master. And I go back to my calibration cube, and I hit Scale Master. Oh, not that button, excuse me. Set Scene Scale. You'll see that it's set already at 25 millimeters. So I know that it's where I want it to be. All right. To begin my sculpture, we are going to make sure we have good reference. You know, all of my references on a second monitor. And when you're doing a sculpture of 2D to 3D, it is a little bit more challenging. There is, of course, not realistic kind of proportions that artists follow. I mean, they do have like a scale or a rule, but there's room to kind of cheat a little bit. So as the sculptor, you have to take a little bit of creative, artistic liberty in what you're doing, while maintaining, I would say, a trueness to what you're doing. So I've got, you know, good enough reference to kind of help give me the sense that I want for the sculpture. And as I go, we'll deviate from it, and that'll be the artistic liberties being made. But Jim Aparo was a classic artist, and a lot of his work is asymmetrical, I would say. I mean, if you look at the Batman in these pictures, you know, the one brow is a little bit more pronounced or detailed, and I want to maintain that. So this will be a sculpture that will start off symmetrically, and then it will gravitate towards breaking that symmetry to create that uniqueness that's in his artwork. I've always loved taking two-dimensional art and turning it into 3D because it challenges me. As an artist, you want to be challenged. You want to take those challenging, harder risks because it helps build out those skills and develop more as you go. So with that said, we are going to start by appending a 3D sphere. So over here on the right with our subtool palette, we have the append button. We'll plop that sphere and I'll bring it up, and will frame out. And we'll go to our basic move, which is W on the keyboard. And we'll bring it up here, turn transparency on, and go ahead and kind of just start scaling this down. This stage of my workflow I call my sketch sculpt, or rough sketch. It's basically taking and building the idea so that it is roughed in. So it's a rough sketch of sorts. So it looks rough, it looks, you know, unrefined, but it gets the idea out, which allows me to really have a foundation to work off of. I make sure my symmetry's on, that's X on the keyboard, and we're just going to use the mouse to kind of shape out the features. And at this point, you have a choice. You can add the neck now, or you can add the neck later. I will add it now, and it'll be really weird at first, but then we're going to move over to dynameshing. So we're going to just start pulling this out, kind of making sure the chin stays as much as possible. And really get raw. And you can see the polygons are starting to stretch. Okay, because what we're going to do next is going to eliminate that. You see how it's starting to create a split on there? That's going to be good for me later, because it'll be the neck muscles on the back. But now that we're getting to a stage where we're really getting bad stretching, we're going to go ahead and hit that Dynamesh button. It's going to recalibrate all those squares, and we're not going to mess with any of the resolution settings just yet. Kind of just play with it. I'm going to turn transparency off so I can see where this is finding itself on the outside. And I'm using the brush at this, excuse me, I'm using the mouse at this stage. I don't need the pen tool yet, because this is just rudimentary kind of stuff here. I don't know how exactly I'm going to do the neck yet, but I just want to make sure that it's kind of coming out. Kind of soften it with this smooth brush, and bring this neck back a little bit. Bring the nose out just a little bit. And we have the rough base for the shape. And we'll go back to the head, and I'm going to go ahead and you hit Control Shift. You can click over here and select lasso. And that I'm going to cover over the ears and hold Alt, and that'll hide them. That way they're not sticking out of my sculpture. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Control Shift, and I'm going to get my knife curve brush, and I'm just going to cut out where the mouth would be. This isn't the definitive shape or anything. I'm just kind of getting something out. That right there, that corner right there is not very sharp, and I think that will become a problem. So to try that again. Really want to move it up. If you hold space, you can move it up. If you double click Alt, you'll get a sharp corner. Want that. Now we're going to add this kind of triangular shape. And that should be fine. It does create a polygroup, which is perfect because that'll be useful later. And we're just kind of adjust accordingly. Probably want the all right. Now we can go to the pen and we can start using one of my favorite brushes, which is the clay buildup brush. And holding Alt will correct. We're just going to start bringing this. I'm a little off on where the eyes are, so I can try to fix it, or I can just move up the brush or move up the sculpt. So that's what I'm. I like that, so I'm going to leave it that. I have a setting over here. I honestly don't know where that's at, but this is, remember, draw size per brush. So when I switch brushes, the size of the brush doesn't stay the same across the board. I would say that's probably under the brush palette. I'm not sure. Let me see here if it's. I'm not sure where that's at. But that is a setting that I use to help me help the program remember my brush settings. Okay. Trying to format nose a little bit. I don't think I have a really good profile. I have like a 3/4 from the back almost. So this is the best profile that I could find. And this nose is really, really flat compared to what I have. So we're going to make sure that we kind of maintain that. Turn transparency on and see what we can do. I probably will have to bring out the forehead a little bit. That's a little bit more what I like. Holding that Alt again to get those removal. We also want to start bringing the resolution up. I do that. I stick with Dynamesh for the large period of the time when I'm at the beginning here. So we're just going to take the Dynamesh is found over in geometry, and then there's a Dynamesh tab here. I have that all up here, but I only mess with the resolution. I just bump those numbers up, and then I'll just Dynamesh. And right now I'm at 35,000 polygons for my active account. You don't want to go too high, because if you get really, really high really early, it becomes really hard to kind of manipulate your sculpture. So keep those numbers relatively low. I do a lot of removal versus adding. just to kind of just control some. I guess that's when I used to sculpt in clay a lot. I was more of a build up and remove kind of guy. There's obviously the other method is adding on little by little. So it really is that part of the workflow is really dependent on your own personal kind of taste when you're sculpting. Jim has this really kind of like pointed back part on the back of the skull. We're going to try to create that effect. We don't have to do super define here. We don't want to go like real deep into secondary forms just yet. We're just kind of hinting at things at the moment, doing basic structural pieces and elements. If you're not really familiar with the muscular structure, get yourself a nice artistic anatomy book. They will definitely have good photo reference to kind of get you in that base for good anatomy. At this point, I'm going to switch to the standard brush for a moment. It cuts a little bit better than the actual clay buildup brush, so it kind of more sharper cuts, and we're going to add those. I feel like we want to maybe start adding in the ears just to kind of help get. You want to make sure you have a good roundness, so the head kind of flows back. You don't want it to be too flat in the front. That'll make some issues. Check our overall. The back of the neck is really thick, so we're going to want to tame that a little bit. But if you look at the reference, he does have, at least in this particular profile, a more straight swoop coming straight down. I do want to capture that without making the neck too large. So I have to kind of, that will work for now anyways. Let's check the sides. It is really thick. This gap here is way wide. We're going to pinch that in. There's a lot of flexibility in digital sculpting. That's a lot of the reason why I transitioned to that. I remember way back when 3D printing and all that was starting to be, talked about, and I remember thinking, well, that's not the same as all the hard work that I put into my sculptures. I'm doing this all by hand. But the reality of it, I think, for me at that time was I didn't understand it. I didn't know how to do it. And I turned my nose to that concept because of it. And that wasn't the approach. I remember first time I dove into Zbrush, and I couldn't figure anything out. I did not know how to do anything in it, and I was frustrated by it. And I, put it down and walked away. But the time it takes to sculpt something by clay, it's a lot. And finding that time isn't always easy. So naturally, I was gravitated towards the idea of working digitally because I like computers. been using computers for a multitude of things for years, and I I took the time and I sat back down, and instead of turning my nose to it, I gave it a shot again. And through the years, I kept working on it, and that's the secret. If you work and you keep using the program, pushing your limits, you're going to learn the program and you're going to get better with the program. And you might find that it's better. I can sculpt so much faster, I can get so much more done, and I can take risks that I didn't take when I was sculpting in clay necessarily. I did take risks. I think as an artist, no matter what format you're using, you have to take risks. Otherwise, you'll limit yourself on what you're willing to do, and then your work doesn't progress. But with 3D, you can go pretty risky because you can undo it. And I think I like that safety net. And that may be the reason why some people might frown on digital, is because, you can take more risks, and that might be frustrating for traditional artists. But I've done both, so I've made a choice. We're gonna start pulling out the ears. It's gonna really help us see this a little bit more. So this is the crudest thing you do. Wrong spot though. Let me make the brush a little bit straight up. Dynamesh. I mean, that was pretty straightforward. The way he draws these ears are they're straight up triangles. So pretty traditional, pretty classic. Just got to make sure we get kind of the right flow on the edge here. Right now it's a little inwards, so we'll take our trusty mask tool, flip the mask. That way we're not moving the inside of the ears so much. There we go. And we got a good starting point. We will, of course, take this and tweak it and modify it as we go, but we're starting to get a grasp of things. We're starting to see it. The eyes need to be figured out. That's not how they're going to be. This is a cowl that will be designed for mesh eyes, so you won't see the white of the eyes. And I'll show you what I do to hide the eyes, because we now know where the eyes are, so the eyes will stay in that area. We just have to refine it, and of course just start actually on the secondary details where we really start refining the look and what the basic look overall of what we're trying to achieve. But like this back part, I don't like how this line is flowing right here necessarily. I don't know. I might leave that. The ears, of course, they're gonna be tweaked as we go. But we're at the base of the sculpture, and we're gonna start on secondary form, refining those shapes, because that's really what's gonna start dialing in the look. All right, so to get to the basically more to the detail stuff, we are going to increase the resolution of the Dynamesh. It's still sticking with the Dynamesh. And that's almost more than double. So we'll start with that. I'm at 400 resolution. It put me at about 81,000 active points here. And it's going to start noodling in, keeping it symmetrical, of course. He has a very pronounced jaw, so we're going to try to simulate that. He's got this cool roundness. At least the profile that I have. That's really over exaggerated, but fine for now. Tone it down later. But he has this really defined kind of curvature in his brow. I haven't decided how I want the base of this to go. There's a lot of interesting differences that happen in the comics. One of the cool things is that how the cape comes off of it. So I don't know if I want like a point, but maybe a rounded point. I haven't figured that part out yet. I'm going to start adding some muscular tendrils here. I have another image. Pull it on the screen here, and it's really low res. So it's a really small picture, but this is the look that I want to create. It's very prominent in this particular screenshot of an old comic. Get that in there. Actually, a little bit done differently compared to the other image I have of the back of the head. You know, finding the back of the head in the artistic 2D drawings is it's not as common or easy to find. They just, when you're making a comic book, that's just not an area that is really featured. Come in here with the clay buildup. I know in one of the profiles that I have, there's a little bit of a protrusion where the Adam's apple kind of area would be. So I try to simulate that as well. Let's focus on the brow. This is where you're really going to define the look of this particular sculpture. And I have a few good images that I want to kind of reference. But before we do that, let's get the eyes covered. We want the eyes to be white. So we're going to go back to our subtool palette, and then we're going to append another sphere. And right off the bat with the sphere, we are going to change the properties of it. So I'm going to go to Skin Shade 4, which you can find in your tool palette or your material palette, and it's under the standard materials, I believe. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. Right there. And then change it to white, and then I'm going to fill this so that this object stays white. And then I'll change everything back to kind of a basic gray, and I'm using my basic material. And then we're gonna scale this to a little bitty eyeball size. Kind of fit in that area. Kind of shape it. This will serve as our temporary white eye. And then we'll mirror and weld it so it's on both sides, and then we can start adjusting. Eyes of this particular gem style, they're always different. There's not a set kind of look. So I have to kind of just look at all the different examples and really pick. I have one that I like. It's very angry. So we're gonna go for that particular look. And these are gonna be asymmetrical as well. But for now, I'm just gonna keep them symmetrical. There's gonna be a lot of changing that happens in this area, and we'll get more descriptive of why. Just making sure that the eyes, when I did this, they are still in the area that I need them to be. Okay. Now we continue on the brow. Bringing it down gives it more anger. Going to try the Damien Standard, kind of pinch this corner in. Damien Standard is a cutting tool. It kind of cuts lines, and it's a good tool for shaping out things. A little bit different than if you held this the Alt key on Standard brush. So I kind of start to use it more when I'm trying to shape out some areas. Like the nose here from the top, it's very flat. I don't necessarily want it to be like that. I do have an image where it looks like that, but that's going to be, again, artistic preference. So we're just going to shape this thing out a little bit, because it is a little bit of a wonkiness to it. So I'm going to try the H polish. Kind of helps flatten this area out. So with a combination of some smooth, and I'll use it on the nose as well. Trying to define that shape just a little bit so that it doesn't feel too wide. Some of this stuff we will be able to really refine when we topologize this model, and that will give us the opportunity to kind of shape out some of the parts of the sculpt to our liking that we don't have as much control to, because when we retopologize, we are essentially taking the topology and making it a very, very low poly, and that will really help get the shapes the way we want them. And I'll show you more about that when we get. Checking edges. Basically, I'm focusing my eye on this outer edge right here. And that sort of silhouette, I'm trying to control it a little bit more consistent. These are kind of the different things that you really like think about. It doesn't really have it in the artist work like a temple area, but I am going to try to kind of create a little bit of a divot in this area because it just is natural. We'll work on the base here for a second here to kind of help establish something. I have to create kind of a little bit of a bump here, so it's not curving inwards. But go back to our silhouette and see if we're capturing that still. The brow is definitely more pronounced against the forehead. I'm trying to get that. I'm going to bump it up more resolution. Going to our Damien standard for cutting. A lot of back and forth, you know, and that's just the beginning stages of tightening up the forms. You are going to kind of teeter-totter between one idea and another. The thing about Damien standards is the bigger it gets, the less kind of harsh it is. So sometimes I'll make it really big. I'm trying to cut in some lines that I really want. Then you hit that smooth brush, it really takes them down. The ears, I'm really torn. When I look at the artwork, they feel and look very round in this area. In past sculptures, I would have had done like a kind of like a sharp ridge thing going on. I don't know why it's doing that, but I don't feel like that's how he is in the artwork. It feels very rounded. It feels very kind of purposeful, like it should be like that. So I'm probably gonna leave it like that, but I do want to tighten it up and make it a little bit more um, cleaner, in this area at least. I do feel very thick still. Sure, I like that. One of the things I see a lot in artists starting out is not having a fully really tuned eye on what you're doing, which is okay, as a beginning artist, sculptor, whatever. Um, that's one of the elements that you really have to focus on and develop, and that is having an eye that can look at something and sort of see what is missing, what needs to be done. There's so many works of art that I've seen over the years where someone's working on something and they kind of get to a point that is like, a this kind of looks like it, or this sort of is it, and then they stop, and that is, I think, an issue with really just not refining their their eye in terms of recognizing where they're at, what needs to be done or needs to be changed. And I think also that's, social media or online can hurt that, because you could post pictures, say, hey, this is what I'm working on. And people are going to say, yeah, that looks good. You're doing it. That looks great. I see it. But you mistake that as confirmation or affirmation that you're done, or it's you don't need to do anything else. Because when people see it, when you're getting there, you're working towards it, and those forms are coming out, that doesn't mean that you're done. You have to be able to recognize that. Starting off a sculpture at the same time is also challenging, because you have to be able to recognize that it's not going to look the way you want it right away. You're building towards it, and that can often be challenging. That was always challenging for me in my early days, especially when I was working in clay, because clay was a lot longer to get to some point that I was happy with. And sometimes I'd be working on it and I just get really discouraged or frustrated and just kind of want to stop. But I think a trait of me in terms of my, I guess, personality is that I never actually let that be my point of stopping. I always kept pushing myself. I'm very hard pressed to quit. I don't like to quit. And so I'll keep pushing myself until I'm happy with wherever it is that I'm trying, whatever it is I'm trying to do. Just refining these secondary forms a little bit more. We want to make sure that they're in place before we move on to the next step. The next step in this is going to be retopologizing. And then final details. Like the brow area, it's not done. It looks like what I want, but it's not done. And again, we talked about breaking symmetry. I haven't done that yet. So, this is getting to where I want it, but it is not there. So we're just looking for the base to work off of. I'm also working, and this is part of being an artist, is, I did a Neil Adams inspired cowl. And I'm working very hard to make sure, because Neil Adams and Jim Apro are very similar in artistic style, but different. I hope that makes. I mean, it is what it is. Similar yet different. They have a different approach, especially in the brow, and so in the eyes. So I'm trying to work really hard to make sure that I am doing something different from that art piece that I did. That's one of the reasons why, like the ears, for example, these are very different. And I'm not even sure I'm done with the ears. I noticed in a lot of the Jim's work that they kind of flare out a little bit. So maybe I want to flare them out a little bit. They're not straight up and down. Let's play with that. I also want to be careful with that because, again, when you're making a cowl, when you cast a cowl, that can backfire in the casting phase. So I'm actually going to bring those back. I don't think that's a good idea. I like them pretty straight. I mean, I think we're at a spot where I can probably move on to the next step. I have my foundation, my secondary forms. I'm going to play with the nose, just pinching backwards so that it gets. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave a slight pinch there like that. I'm going to bring the basically with the mesh eye out some. The reason why, and we'll cut into this. So when you make the cowl and you put mesh eyes in it, eyelashes can touch the mesh. And if that happens, it can be bothersome for the wearer. So I try to make it clear enough for that. So for an average length of eyelashes, that should be plenty of clearance. That's kind of a big important detail to consider. And we'll probably tweak these eyes still even further. So I think I want them to be a little bit more angular, but I'm going to tweak them when it's all put together. So what we have here at this stage is just a rough sketch of the sculpt. And I think a lot of what we have here is a good base of for the cow. To work off of. So we want to retopologize it. That's going to give us our clean form to work on. So to do that, I'm going to take everything here and basically merge it all together. So except for the calibration cube, I'm going to make sure the bottom of this is closed, and I'm going to turn on live Boolean. Not sure why the oh, that's why. Actually, rehide these. And then we're going to live Boolean, make mesh Boolean. Boolean is under geometry, under the I'm sorry, subtool, under Boolean. I just moved all that stuff up. That's going to create, oops. When you do Boolean, that's a common mistake. You gotta make sure the little eyeball is on everything that you want to put together. Now that I have the eyeball on, it will create a new tool. Didn't put this together, so we're going to do it. Now this is all one tool. We'll turn the color off. This is all one. The head and side is no longer in there, so it's just. Now I will use this copy. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to delete all this because I don't need that. And then I'm going to paste it into here. And this is going to be my working model for the retopologizing. So I used to retopologize in a program called TopoGun, but in the 2026 version of Zbrush, it came out with their own topology tools, and it works very similar to how TopoGun worked, and that is my go-to now. You can also do this method using ZRemesher, but we would have to clean up some things. ZRemesher on its own can sometimes, and we'll just show you here, can sometimes do a pretty fair job, but to briefly show you, we'll show you kind of what I would do for ZRemesher. We have a lot of polygroups assigned here, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this, and we're going to use lasso here. Trying to get the outer edge here of all that, and then Control W will create a poly group. That is all of that. I'm going to isolate that. Isolate the eyes. I'm going to isolate. And then I'm going to Control W. That's all one. Or sometimes it makes them the same color. In the book. Now I can take this, and if I hit brushes under the, if you hit the comma, hit this menu, and under brushes, under smooth, there is a smooth groups. And when you smooth, this will straighten out all these edges of the different polygroups. And the reason why we want these clean edges is because we're going to have Zbrush do it for us. And then I'm going to do it manually. I would do it around the base here, but I'm not caring about that right now. I'm going to make okay. So, for the sake of showing you, now when I go to Zbrush under geometry, I will set keep groups, tell it not to smooth the groups. I like to put adaptive size to 0, and then we'll do half. It'll redo the topology for you automatically based on the polygroups. And it helps kind of control your edges, so you have like the edge around the cowl and eyes and the mouth and the base. Normally I would go and highlight the actual base so I have an edge around the base of the mask itself, but I'm not in this case. And you can see in this instance it did some weird things, and that is something that happens, and that's why I don't always use it. It's really done some really interesting things. It leads me to think that there might be something hidden inside. Something. No, it's fine. But you have in some instances good control, in some instances you don't. You can play with it. I've had luck with it sometimes I haven't. It really is a hit or miss kind of situation. But we'll take it down a little bit lower and see if it will cooperate a little better. So here it is. We're going to half it again. I don't like what it's doing around the base of the cowl. That's kind of weird. But if we go lower, you see the mesh has got an error, which we can fix under geometry, mesh integrity, fix mesh. But that usually is a sign that there's something about your sculpt that it does not like. Let's try and Zbrush it again. See if it corrects itself. Still, again, doing some really weird really weird stuff around this edge. So we're going to smooth it out with the smooth groups on and see if it likes it afterward. That issue is likely happening because of the Boolean operation. We'll get rid of this entire bottom portion. See if that helps. I think it's going to cooperate a little bit more now that we've kind of able to fix the mesh integrity, fix it. Go back to Zbrush, half it again, and see what it does. Much better. So it's kind of got over itself. It's going to do something weird in this corner, which would normally bug me. The base of this is pretty much toast. We can just slice it, kind of give it a fresh start. Let's go. Actually, we'll have to use a regular slice because you remesh it. That. Like I said, the edge of this mouth, it does not like it for some reason. We can try to fix it and see if it'll cooperate. Because if I want, I would go one more lower, I think. This area right here. Wonky. Yeah, see this area right here that is a bad spot. But this is technically workable as a kind of a foundation to play with. But that is one way of doing it. We're going to go back in time. So when I go to retopology, or retopo as they call it, and I click on this, it's going to ask a question. And that's going to be create a new mesh or convert the one you are on. We don't want to convert the one we're on because that'll turn every one of these squares into a movable topology tool, and that will be a disaster. It'll probably crash Zbrush. So create yes, creates a brand new one, and we make sure solo's on. It puts it in transparency, and then it allows us to really start working. And this is what we're going to start with. We're not going to start with those there. I like to start in the nose area, and I try to start with big shapes and refine the shapes as we go. That way it can go a little bit quicker. So like, for example, try to hit this nose in one giant shape. I'm going to have to make this brush a little bit, but there's one big giant shape. I know already I'm going to have to break this shape up into at least two. So holding the space bar gives us some loops. And I'm trying to flow with, like, this will connect to here, this will connect into there, and that will go up into there. We're going to make a base around the eye. Just basically working with that. Large shapes, refine the shapes later. Using tool regularly will allow you to move it, and when you move it, it automatically fights to the sculpt underneath it, and that's how you retain your shapes. So There is an art to it, basically a flow for your topology. You want to move with the shapes as much as you can. One of the things is that we're not creating something that's going to be animated, so we don't have to follow all the rules. We are creating something that's for clean sculpture, and we're going to print it later, so we aren't tied to a lot of the rules and requirements around like edges and corners and stuff, because this is not going to get animated. If that is something you're going to be doing, you definitely want to check out some more refined topology videos. Just working it around. So I got around the eye, come around for this brow. You can see pretty straightforward. I enjoy retopologizing. I think it's a pretty straightforward. Something weird. Sometimes it doesn't cooperate. Like it's not wanting to snap, so I'm going to add another point there and then manually. We have a triangle here that may not cooperate with us later. We'll see. I try to avoid triangles as much as possible, because they can do some weird things when you start adding detail. But I don't make it 100% avoidable. Sometimes you have to put a triangle. It makes sense to put a triangle, and triangles do work. It's just sometimes they can cause you problems, so play with it. One of the things that I will use a lot in this process is dynamic subdivision. We haven't talked about it or used it yet because we've been working with just a quick raw sculpt. But dynamic subdivision is basically, it takes what you're doing and it subdivides it and rounds it out and all this stuff. At this early of a stage, it's going to do some weird things. But we will be utilizing that in this process. We're not near anywhere at that point to do it effectively, but it is something that we will use. Now, when we're working on it at this stage, if we hold Alt, we can actually pull topology to recreate. That's another method. You hold Alt and click it, you'll get kind of a more broader selection. You can even hold Alt, click it a third time, and it'll go all the way around. We don't want to do that in this instance, but just one of the many tools that come out of this. I'm actually gonna Okay, so we are finished up with our completely retopologized tool. We got a couple areas that we will need to just address because sometimes things don't go entirely as we want. So if I hit the dynamic subdivision button, that's D, I can see there are some holes. We'll try to see if we can fix them first by mirroring and welding. In that case, it just left it open. No big deal though. We will manually fix this just by going to our Z modeler tool. That's Z modeler tool. That's brush Z, and you'll see it down there. For this one, we are going to just stitch to midpoint, these 2 points here. And that fixes that. And I thought I saw one a minute ago on the front. For the front, we have this right here. And there is something there, which is probably a piece in the middle. Yeah, right here. I'm going to get rid of those. Stitch. And then up here, we have an area that it does not connect to anything. There is not a poly loop here. We'll just check it out. I don't think I want to add one. Let's add one. Yeah, I think that's fine. We'll just smooth that out. And then here, we don't want it to do the midpoint. We just go to endpoint. Just inside there. It's tucked inside. And then we will do a little bit of smoothing. We do want that smooth to be the smooth retopologized so that it sticks to the surface of the mold. These a little bit nicely distributed. There's a really big thing here, and what I see here, there's a poly loop here, and I think that would be very good if it went all the way across. So what we're going to do, we're going to delete this, insert a poly loop, and then we'll just have a triangle, do some bridging. And then we'll some smoothing, get that up a little better. It got a little spread out towards the end here, which is fine. This area, it's not going to be a lot of detail on this. One of the things that you have to consider, we can add a whole edge loop here. If I were to texture this, you would want these to be as evenly spaced out as much as possible, so you get an even resolution on that. But I'm not texturing this, so I don't need to worry about it. That is a tip for any kind of sculpture that you're thinking about doing a texture. That's something you want to see and have me go over. Let me know in the comments. I can go through that whole process of texturing a sculpture. But now we're kind of in the stage where I'm just doing my own fixes. I'm not going to use the retopology tool really anymore, but there are some areas that I'm going to adjust that are not, like I don't like this right here. That's a little wonky. We're going to fix that manually. So the bulk of what we needed to do is taken care of. But this area is really wonky, so we'll manually kind of draw this out. So trying to see how just adding an edge loop here to try to back to the retopology tool. The retopology tool do a few things that. There we go. Yeah, that's a better flow for the topology. Much better. Okay. I think we're officially done with that brush. So now I'm going to start doing some separations because right now it's really all one polygroup except for the eyes. The eyes in the time lapse, I just did a close hole and then let it kind of do it. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, but we do need to isolate some polygroups. So we'll do polygroups with polyloops. The other option is you can go on the edge and you can do polyloop and click on the edge. It'll do that too. It's personal preference. I usually do it by surface because you can do a few extra things that you can't do with just the edge polylooping polygroup tool. Okay. Change that. Auto group. I want them to be different. I guess I need to isolate them separately. Then we'll do the polyloop. If you want to change it, you can hold Alt and it'll change the color. I want it to be different. And then we're going to auto group. So all of these are separate sections. So now we have everything is separated. And here's where we can start doing some interesting things. If I hit crease groups, this can be found under where is that? Crease. Under geometry crease, and then you'll have a crease button. We have crease polygroup, so crease PG, and that'll basically crease only your polygroup edges. So when you hit dynamic, you start to get some more definition. We do have something wrong here. We'll find it and fix it. Here it is at its lowest detail, bumping up some of the dynamic subdivision settings. I like to do a crease level of 3, which kind of softens and rounds the edges, and then I like to bring the smooth subdivision up to 5. But here it is at the undetailed. This is just basically a low resolution mesh that is ready for the detail. But before we get to the detailing, we are going to do right there. We want to get rid of. Trying to find him. He's very well protected here. I'm going to do uncrease, crease again. Gonna give us, there we go. So now we're ready to really finesse this and get this going. We do have the original sketch compared with a lot more detail, obviously, because this is a low res mesh that has no detail. We just did basically the baseline of the cowl, and this, of course, at this stage, it's perfectly smooth. There's no real weird surfaces or anything like that. So you know, it's like a fresh canvas basically. And so first things first, I want to you know, clean up the edge where the cowl is going to be. We're gonna do a lot of what these stages are going to be done in the Z modeler tool. So you know, I'm gonna do move infinite radius here. I'm gonna bring that in. Get a more defined edge because we did not have a defined edge, and that's easily fixed. We got this isn't cooperating, so we'll do the move brush radius. Points, just tweaking and moving. Visually, for the edge thickness, I just eyeball it. I mean, there is no like whatever set thickness you want. Might do single edge movements, just whatever is necessary to get a good edge. And we'll look at it again because you can see it's really angled, really flat. Like that's really weird. We'll fix it though. Just pulling out the edge, checking it. Always check from multiple angles. Make sure you're not having a weird result. If you ever see when you're moving edges, points, and they snap like that, you just turn no attraction on. I usually don't have attraction on because it will sometimes snap another point if it gets too close. I don't need that. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't, but in this particular situation, I do not. So we're getting somewhere here. Eyeballing that thickness. The mouth area obviously needs some tweaking. This is really the starting point of refining this sculpture to its final stages. This is the part where I kind of really enjoy it because you're starting to really bring it to life. You have a rough sketch, and that is just the idea. Now we can really make that idea come to life. So, adjusting, tweaking, getting everything into space. I'm gonna get rid of this a little. Got a nice edge around the cowl. This corner's really rounded. We don't want that. Easy fix. You just crease it here. Hold spacebar, turn the crease. Now it's pointed, sharp. If we look back at our references for the mouth area, it's got a nice little rounded edge here. I think we've maintained that. There might be a little bit of a curvature this way. Let's try to create that. I would say corner. And we're going to move. Yeah, I like that. We're going to add some creases into some other areas as well to kind of help create some sharpness. Edge of the nose here. We're going to extend that to this part of the brow. Maybe. I don't think honestly I think keep the ears rounded. I don't know. Let's this is the part where you can try things. I'm gonna see what it looks like creasing this part of the edge. I mean, part of me does like that, but just don't think that is the look. that we want. So to not do that. We tried it, you know, that's the thing. Trying it out. We are, I think, gonna crease this edge. And I don't know if I want that either. And maybe I do. That's a tough one. We'll hold off on that. I'm liking that. I mean, really, we're at a good stage that we can start projecting details. So what I'm going to do is duplicate it. Sometimes when you duplicate it, it throws it off like that. You just undo and it puts it back. I haven't figured out why it does that sometimes. But it's not a major issue. Just undo in case it happens to you. We're going to make sure that the eyeball is on only the sketch that we've labeled here. And then what we're going to do is start projecting the forms that are here. Because we're so low on the subdivision level, we are not going to draw in that, because if you look at this is very organic. It's rough edges and stuff. We're not going to bring all that in, and that's going to help us kind of start shaping out the details and get it to a place where we can start playing with it on our own, but still have a lot of the ideas that we came up with in the sketch. When I do this, I make sure that I'm on solo because I don't want to be confused seeing two things at once. And then I turn the subdivision off. Dynamic subdivision. We haven't added subdivisions, but we are going to add subdivisions now. Control D adds your first subdivision. Now, before I project anything, I'm going to create a morph target. A morph target is when you basically copy your form the way it is on the screen right now. Then you project the details, and anything that you want to revert back to, you use the morph tool, and that's what I'm going to do. The morph target is, I have it in my custom tool palette, but it's under here under morph target, and then you can store the morph target and delete it from here, switch it, but I have those three things up here. I don't mess with any of this other stuff, so I don't worry about it. But once I have that, I will project, and that's under subtool, project, and project all. I don't even mess with any of these settings. Sometimes I'll bump this number up, the distance number up, but because we're working one-to-one, I don't have to do that too much. But sometimes if you bump it up too high, it starts to pull from the other side and can start doing some weird stuff. So it's something to play with. If you don't like the results, you always go back. That's the beauty of the digital. But we're going to project. Before we project, I got ahead of myself. I don't want the mouth detail. I don't want my base of this new low res to copy the base of the other one. I'm using my own pre-existing base here, so I don't need or want it. So I am going to hold off on that and just Control Shift click just the base of the sculpture. Notice that the edges of the base of the cowl, around the mouth, around the eyes themselves, it's all gone. Then I'm going to Control click off to the side and create a masking. Then I'll bring it back by Control Shift clicking, and then Control and clicking the sculpture, I'm going to ease back the mask 3 or 4 times. And then I'm going to Control click again, and the only thing that is not masked is the basic shape of the cowl. Then I'll project. And that's going to be just bringing in the details, but still preserving a lot of my edges, so I don't have to do a lot of back and forth. And because I faded the mask out, it's going to fade those details backwards. You can always hit the switch button to kind of see what effects it did have. If it had anything you don't like, you can use the morph. I'll just show you what the morph brush does. I usually take this intensity down to 8 or 7, somewhere around there, and it'll basically revert back to your original morph target. But it does it subtly, so it's not changing a great deal all at once. So that is the purpose for all that. I'm just going to go back. And now we can create another subdivision, Control D. Now we're on subdivision 3. And we'll repeat the process. Control click, delete morph target, store morph target, because you want a new morph target. You don't want the old one. You want this is your new one. And then we can project. It's starting to bring in even more detail. Really refining it. You can see some of the shapes, the organicness of that sculpture is starting to pull through. Maybe you don't like some of that, so we can take it down a notch. But most of it we want. I like to keep my ears pretty perfect, so I'm gonna return those back. Okay, we're going to Control D again. Control Shift click, same routine. We did forget to do our new morph target. No big deal. But we want that because we don't want these ears to change. And now I'm going to do some softening with the smooth. I'm going to lower the intensity just to kind of knock some features down a little bit. Create one more morph or subdivision, but I'm not going to project anything anymore. Just looking, we got a pinching here. Let me check the original low poly. Pinching was there. It is. I'm not too concerned. So this is a part where you start learning some interesting things. Because I'm going to 3D print this, I am not concerned about that pinch. I can sand that out. But if it does bother you, you can work it out through some basic manipulation in the topology. If I take it down, lower my brush here, I can work it out. But in my experience, it's not that big of a deal. We're going to be filament printing this, so you're going to have inconsistencies like that anyways, and you just sand them out. So you don't need to spend a whole lot of time worrying about it, but here it is mostly taken care of. If it did bother you. This gets a little narrow right here. I look at the original. I'm not too keen on that. So what I will do is lower the topology, and then I will just get my move brush and correct it. And that should translate right back. I'm gonna work more on some more smoothing just to make sure that the surface is pretty consistent. We did project quite a bit. This is looking pretty nice. I never adjusted the eyes in terms of this ridge, and that is bothering me, so we're gonna correct those. You can still use Z Modeler at this stage as long as you're just moving things. You can't delete topology or add any loops or anything, so I'll use that to help kind of manipulate this the way I would have liked it to begin with. Hard to see, so I'm switching to skin shade 4. Now I have a much better eye. Very happy with that. Now we're ready to get to the final detailing, and we will break the symmetry because we want the eyes and the brow to be different from each other. Before I do that, I'm going to duplicate, I'm going to label some things so I know what is what. This is my low poly. This is the original mesh. This is the high poly. But it is the original, so put an O there. And this is the one where we're going to really start customizing it and getting that unique brow that's asymmetrical. So make sure my references are up on my screen, at least the ones that I liked. And we're going to just start tweaking it. And some of the tweaks we're going to make on the lower res so we can change things more broadly. When you have more topology and you try to change things, you're going to get minimal movement in some cases. So we're going to make sure that we're in that. And we're just going to start toying with it. Starting with basic shape. Focusing on the eyes. Got a lot of interesting eyes drawn in his work. That's pretty cool. Switching over to our Damien standard. Not letting me adjust the brush for some reason. All right, here we go. You know, his brows are just so unique in every one of his drawings. That's what makes this fun. Using this Damien standard brush with a light touch, kind of get subtle changes at a time. Just working everything carefully, slowly. I don't know why I added that. I'm just trying it. On our highest resolution, we're looking at about 1,000,000 polygons. We might take it up another. We want to get some really good detailed lines. This is all our artistic interpretation of the artist's intentions and work in their drawings. Play more with the eyes. Make sure we've got what we want. Doing a pinching here for the nose and just holding Alt down so it's a reversal, not pinching upwards, but pinching inwards. Gonna lower our intensity on our smooth, and I'm just gonna take down these corners here on this eye. Really sharp. Use some pinch tools here to kind of strengthen this area. Actually, I'll use the Indian standard on this. Bring it up a lot. Doing all of this still asymmetrically. This is a very asymmetrical piece, but I'm doing things, I'm still trying to match both sides. So I'll do one thing on one side, but do it on the other side too. But I'll just do it manually and it may come out a little bit different, and that's fine. I use the pinch reverse on the muscular tones here, and then regular pinch right here. So I get that bump, then reverse pinch down the middle. A little bit of a pinch there. I pinch on the inside here with a reversal pinch. A little strong, so we're going to take our pinch intensity down. We want subtle changes here. And I think we're at a stopping point for this. I really like where it's at. I love this eye here. I don't know if I like this eye so much, so I might tweak it just a little bit more. This shape is really working for me. Tweak it just a little bit. I think that's better. That's pretty good, I think. we are now going to check it out on the actual bust we started with. So I'm going to turn that bust back on, turn solo off. Make sure the eyes are still fitting in the right spot. They are. You can see the nose is sticking out. We'll take a look at that. But here he is. Pretty good. Lower the resolution on this and turn symmetry on. We want this to do both sides. Just tweaking that nose. Pick my one profile pick. See if the nose is still not as flat as it was in this picture. Let's see if we can't undo. Find something. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I think this is take that out. I don't like that swoop down like that. Correct that. There it is. That's. I think that's. It's part of the eye. Still bugging me. Let's see if we can bring it in. Yeah, that's what I. All right, there he is. This is the cowl. This is pretty much finished. Might tweak the ear a little bit here. Feels for some reason as I look at it, feel like it's thick. There we go. Yeah. Yours might be a little too tall, but you know, for the most part, I think we're good. Let me play with that. Come down. Yeah. Sitting at a little over 1,000,000 polygons altogether. This is what the cow will look like worn. I'm very happy with this. This is the cow. One of the last steps that I'll do is take chin and knock it down just a little bit, just for molding. Makes it easier to mold. Or actually, makes it easier to demold is what I meant to say. I'm just kind of taking that chin back. So now it's more rounded. So when you go to peel off silicone, you're not having to work hard over that chin. I'm gonna go to masking. I just want to make sure that I don't mess up this edge. So I'm just going to sharpen the mask and grow it. That way it does not affect this when I use the smooth brush. There we go.
All right, the final step before we get to designing a mold is going to be getting this particular sculpture ready for print, and that is really not that much left for that to take place. We're going to basically create a thickness, or what they call shell, and that thickness is about I'd say 2 millimeters, 2.5 millimeters. This just depends. If you're going to send this off to get resin printed, you don't want to get it too thick, because the thicker you make it, the more expensive it gets. You don't want to make it too thin. I think 2.25 millimeters, 2.25. That's a good number. If you're going to print it in house on a FDM printer, 2.5, 2.25 is fine. But I have a plugin for this that's back to the one I referred to, the Caliper Master. It will basically do it for me. But before I do that, I need to make sure that we are um, locked into that calibration cube. So I go back to the calibration cube over here, and basically on the calibration master tool, I hit Y, bound it to this cube. You see it's pretty dead on 25, but I come over here to the initial caliper size, and then I will set that to make sure it's 25 millimeters. It might change those numbers a little bit, but I always double check the bounding, make sure it's still within that. Then I go back to my actual sculpture, just right here. No, not that one. See that one? Yep. And then I will come down to calibrated extraction, and I'll set my thickness to 2.25. This is all in millimeters. You can set your scale to whatever, centimeters, inches, whatever you want, custom unit. But I stick with millimeters. And then we'll hit tab, make sure that that's locked in, create shell. It's going to create a brand new tool, and it will invert. You just flip the normals. And I like to double check to make sure that it did in fact do what I wanted. Sometimes sometimes it does not fully it doesn't extract or shell to the right dimensions. I've never been able to figure out why. It could be because it's no longer supported, but you can see over here in the top corner, 2.2499. So this is the thickness that I want, and it is going to have, in some cases, just usually in the tight areas, it's going to have some, I guess, artifacting that will appear. So what I like to do is I like to turn on poly frame and turn off the lines so I can see everything, and see right here in the top of the ears really bad. So we are going to fix that up, and that won't be a quick little thing here. So what we're going to do is isolate so that the two are separate. Trying to get this band right there. Now I can Control Shift drag on the side, and then I can auto group, and it should give me two separate groupings, and then I can isolate this group, turn on double so I can see what I'm doing, and just focusing on this group, I can start smoothing that down to kind of tame it. Nothing dramatic. I don't need it to be like obliterated. The more you smooth this down, the thicker the resin's going to get in that area. So, you know, we don't want to make it a solid resin ear. That'll cost you more. I'm going to control click over off to the side to get this masked. Then I'm going to control shift click and bring it out. We can see there's still a little bit there. Control click, and it's going to invert the mask. And now I can play with this area and see if it's going away. And sometimes it doesn't. Then you just get your move brush and you just manually bring it down. We'll control shift click and make sure that I didn't do anything crazy. That's looking pretty good. Looking for any other areas that may have appeared. There's a little bit of overlapping here, so I'm just going to smooth this down a little bit on the edges. But for the most part, I don't see any issues. If you're having a hard time seeing, these poly groups are pretty similar in color. You can always regroup it and get them starkly different color to help you see. But everything looks good. Trouble areas just to keep in mind if you're new. These areas of the eyes, corners of the mouth. Any area that's kind of tight, shifting and changing tightly are going to be areas that you might want to take a look at. You can even control shift and drag and take a peek in your areas, and those are all pretty clear. So this guy's good. Now we're going to do one last step before we're ready to print, and that's going to be adding in some keys and bolt holes for the future mold that we'll be making. So I have a file that I've prepped a long time ago. I created a file that is a 1/4-inch bolt hole size, and that is what I use to plan out all my bolts. And then I had one that I made for the keys, which we'll see here as well. What I do first is I go to the bolt. This is already sized and scaled and everything. And then I'm going to create a brush out of it. So we're going to go to create insert mesh. And then I am going to basically click and drag and adjust the draw size until I get it to match the original. So this is going to lock the scale of the bolt. So every time you put it into the model, it will always be the same size. And we just need to make sure that that size matches the original. So it's just a matter of bumping up the number. So right now we're at almost, you can see there's a slight edge there, so we're really close. But again, that's just clicking and dragging your mouse and then holding control. You can see it's just a little too big, so we're gonna try a half size and see what that takes us. And I hold spacebar while holding control to move it around and align it up. And you can see right there, that's pretty dead on. It may be a smidge bigger, but that's okay. And now that I have the brush adjusted, I can go back to the model and under brush, so that's over here, depth right here, we're going to set it to 0. You want this to go through the model. And symmetry on. You click where you want it, hold control, and it'll put it down. If your model disappears like it just did, turn solo on or off, and that will prevent the model from disappearing. And then you can hold spacebar and move it around. And basically, you're adding your bolt holes. One of my problems as a mold maker is I always go a little crazy with bolts, and I always end up hating myself because the more bolts you have, the more work you have to put into bolting everything. You don't need a crazy amount. Try to do like 2-inch apart or whatever. You need to be mindful of where your splits are going to be. I know I'm going to have one down here, so I don't want to get too close to it. Obviously, there'll be a split down the middle. So pay attention to all that. That is part of this main model, and we don't want that. So we're going to control click shift to isolate, and then we'll split hidden, which is under split hidden. And now it's its own subtool. And we'll dock it right here. This is going to tell it to subtract when we get to the Boolean. And then the next thing I want to do, and I'll just go to the original bolt hole, I'll just use this file. I'm going to import my mold key. And this is going to help the mold lock onto the sculpture and keep it from sliding away when you're putting everything together. So in that, I just have a generic circle made, and we'll create a brush for that. And a new one. This one, I don't need to match this size. This is going to be based on how I feel it looks for this. So we're going to make sure that we do have our bolts on because we don't want to interfere. We're going to make sure that our brush is embedded. I have that on my custom toolbar here, but that was under the brush depth menu. And then we're just control, that's way too big. So we'll just adjust the size. Let's try 15. That's pretty good. We're going to have silicone that's going to come around here. We're going to bring it down just a little bit. Let's try 12. That'll work. And we're just going to place a couple. And here. And then it's good to have a couple because when you're putting the mold down, if you have just one, the mold can still rotate this way. But if you have two, it prevents it from rotating. So I try to have at least two on every part that's going to be a mold part. So that's my two. For this, I make sure that they go through. And these polygroups were designed to be the same on one side and the same on the other side so that when I do this, it will do all of them at once. So we're just going to QMesh, polygroup all, and I'm just going to drag. It doesn't matter if it's too big. We'll adjust them later for the other part of the mold, but everything looks in good order. We're going to make that disappear as well, which when we separate. So let's go ahead and separate it. Control Shift click. All the different polygroups. Split hidden. Mark it as subtraction. Turn the eyeball on. Turn the eyeball on the original. And when we hit live Boolean, it creates negative space. And we'll just go ahead and make mesh Boolean, which if you didn't know, that's under the subtool palette under Boolean. Sometimes you'll get an error. That's usually because there's something is just not right in the order. If that happens, usually it'll create a second tool, and then you can just try again, and it'll fix itself. And here it is. Let's see how it fixed itself. It has an issue right there, so we need to actually investigate, see what's going on with that. So let's delete that. Number one thing that usually causes that error is that you have something flipped. So I'm going to turn double off, and I'm going to look at my model. Hey, this model looks good. Let's look at those look good, but double's on, turn double on, that looks good. And that looks good as well. So now we have to kind of investigate a little bit. I want to make sure no other tool is on. So if you hold Shift and click on the eyeball, it'll turn everything on or off. So I'm going to turn this on, this on, this on. Now let's try it again. Still has some issues. We want to make sure that there's no artifact that we can't see, something that's really tiny. So I'm going to take this model and I'm going to auto group, Control Shift click. Notice that it didn't disappear, so something may have been hidden. I'm going to hit delete hidden and everything's good. So I'm going to go at it again, turn the arrow on this time so it just focuses downward. We might have another issue where it's extending outwards with our shell. So let's take a look. There's a lot of little missing pieces here. So I'm going to hit close holes. And we can see that there were a bunch of holes there because the color is different. So I'm going to make this all one group, give it a little smooth, and we'll see if that fixed it.
All right, this is pretty much done and ready to print. If I were sending this to get resin printed, this would be perfect for resin printing. It doesn't have a lot of excessive areas that don't need to be printed. We have our base that our mold will set on, and you know, everything's hollowed out, so it's good to go. Some guys might take the mouth off and the eyes. I don't do that because the time it takes to go put all that back, and you know, I'm building a mold around this. If those areas are blank, I'm kind of have to guess what I've done with it. So this makes everything good to go and ready. But I'm not sending this off. I'm going to print it in-house. So that means I need to do one extra step, and that is create a solid flat base. Right now, as it sits, there is not a lot of surface for this to touch the bed of the printer. So I need to correct that. Otherwise, there's a high chance that this could get knocked off while it's being printed. I could add supports along all the edges, but again, you know, that is also an area of potential issue. I've seen it all. And so what I've come to develop for my workflow is just creating a solid foundation for the whole thing to print off of. And it's not that hard. I will basically turn on my polyframe so I can see all my grouping. The blue base is what I want to isolate. So I'll Control Shift click right in the corner, and that will give me both bases. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get it, but we'll get it. There we go. And then Control Shift, get rid of that. And then I will Control click to basically turn this whole thing into a mask. Control Shift click off to the side brings everything back, and then Control click inverts the mask. Now I can drag everything down to create that base. So I'll do W for my move gizmo, and your gizmo, it might be, you know, all crooked and off to the side. To fix that, you can hold Alt and click on this circle here, and then you can bring it to the center by clicking on this kind of map pin. And then now I can just drag this straight down. Hit Q to get out of that. Control Shift drag to turn all the masking off. Then I'm going to hit Control Shift, and I'm going to get my knife curve brush. If you click over here, whatever is on this, let's say I'm on, you know, select, this will allow me to change it. This does beautiful, clean, closed cuts. So when I hit Control Shift and drag, it will lock on different angles. I want it nice and flat. And then spacebar can move it around, and we'll just slice off the bottom. And now we have a perfect flat base that will bite right on the printer. I don't have to worry about creating any kind of supports or anything funny for that. So this as is ready to be printed. That tool also is good and handy if you have a printer that maybe isn't as tall as your sculpture. Like I know for the fact this is a little bit too tall, so I would Control Shift and use the knife curve and cut the ears off. But before I do that, I want to Control Shift and hit spacebar, and there is split to parts. So now when I cut these ears off, it masks them, and I can go over to split and then split mask points, and now the ears are separate. And I don't need any keys. I can line these up pretty well and glue them just fine. So they're all going to get finished and sanded and everything in between. So this is how I would print it, and it is how I'm going to print it. So make sure though that you have duplicated your final piece here, because you need this final piece for the next step, which will be the next video, and that is making a 3D matrix mold around this piece. So make sure you have liked this video and have subscribed so you don't miss out on that. That is the big video I think a lot of people have been asking about the most, is how do I do the matrix molds? And we will definitely pick up this sculpture and go through that process in the next video. But for now, he's ready to be printed. So thank you for watching. Thank you. I know this was a long one. Thank you for taking the time sitting through and watching this. If we went over a lot, and if you have any questions, or you know you weren't sure about something that I did, feel free to comment down below. I'll be happy to answer any questions you've got, and I hope it's been as helpful as it has been fun to make it, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. For now, have a good day, and we'll catch you later.